Bharti Airtel's first quarter numbers coming in. Reema's there in the Bombay studio to take us through those numbers. Reema.
Well, at least on the bottom line, the only figure that we have is the consolidated net profit, and that is coming at 1,462 crore. Now, this is much better than street expectations. While the estimates on the street were varied, but the lowest that I got was 869, and on the upper end, I got 1,300 crore, which means the bottom line figure of 1,462, which is a 13.3% improvement on a quarter-on-quarter basis, is much better than even the highest estimate that we got on the street in terms of the profitability. Okay, that's the top line. 25572.9, and that seems slightly better than what the street was anticipating. 25572.9 is a growth of 2.5% seen on the consolidated revenues, and this is marginally better than the 2.1% that the street was anticipating. So two numbers. Okay, we've got the EBITDA as well. 9574.5 are margins of 37.7%, and that is a big base. So Bharti Airtel, for another quarter, even in the prior quarter, the company had positively surprised the street by coming out with consolidated revenue growth being the highest in the last 9 quarters. But this time, the company is surprised significantly on the margins, and that's flowing through into the profitability as well. So margins at 37.4 is the best that we've seen, at least in the last 2 or 3 years, as far as I remember, for Bharti Airtel. On a quarter-on-quarter basis, there is an improvement of nearly 85 basis points seen in the company's consolidated margins. So net, these are the numbers that we have. Revenue growth of 2.5% on a quarter-on-quarter basis, 37.4% by way of consolidated margins. That's higher by 85 basis points on a quarter-on-quarter basis, and that is driving a 13% improvement in the profitability, both the margins as well as on the profits. The Bharti Airtel has beaten consensus expectations by a margin. The revenues have seen largely in line. Okay, we've got the India wireless revenues as well, 15052.6. Now that looks like a bit of a miss, so it seems slightly lower than what the street was anticipating. So we'll just try and tell you how much the India revenues have seen a growth of just 2.7% on a quarter-on-quarter basis, slightly lower than the 4.2% that we had anticipated, and it's much lower than the 4.8% that we saw in the prior quarter. So the consolidated revenues have come in line with expectations, but there is no beat on the India revenue business. So let's see whether it's the Africa business which has helped in delivering the top line performance. We were expecting the Africa business to come in a bit subdued on account of the sharp Naira devaluation that we saw towards the end of the quarter. So those currency pressures would have impacted the Africa performance. We don't have those details as of now. The only detail that we have is the consolidated performance, where there is a beat on margins as well as on profitability. And on the India wireless business, the revenue growth at 2.7% just seems slightly shy of what the street was anticipating. Just trying to get hold of what the India wireless margins are. So, okay. All right, that seems to be a bit of an error in the consolidated India wireless EBITDA, because they generally report margins in the range of about 40%. So just try and ignore that line. India wireless EBITDA margins are not 22 or 23%. These are closer to the 40% band. So that's a number which you shouldn't go by. But let's get in Prakash Diwan. He joins us on the show as we scout through more details. Prakash, take us through the key your initial reaction. Limited numbers, but how are you reading it?
Well, Reema, very clearly it seems Bharti is going the idea way in terms of making its business more profitable rather than voluminous. From what I can read on the first cut, that they have also started focusing on efficiency and profitability, which is exactly what we saw missing last time. So they've kind of completed the cycle of sorts, grow the volumes, grow top line, and then kind of start looking at making the business profitable. One of the things this has happened in this quarter, which could have helped, is that they've not offered any discounts, any new schemes on the 4G focus that they had. So it's been a fairly strong organic growth in terms of new client acquisition. an upgrade. So that's what very clearly comes through. And going forward, this is something which will help them add to the war chest that they have to build for the LGO competition.
Okay. Okay, these are just the numbers that we have. So, Bharti has already outperformed Idea by more than 35% since the start of the year. Bharti has seen a gain of close to about 9% in 2016, while Idea has declined by 25%. So there is already a significant outperformance in place. What happens to the stock from here on?
Reema, I think the trend will continue because Idea is yet to, catch up because of the kind of scale that it misses out on. Bharti has focused on building up capabilities and scale, which is significantly larger than Idea. Their presence in almost all circles, barring a couple of them, means that, they would start expanding much faster in terms of both new clients as well as ability to push pricing into the markets where they're well entrenched. So my sense is this outperformance is something that should continue. It's not something which will diminish unless Idea plays catch up at a faster, accelerated pace. So right now, it's Bharti which is continuously top down.
Okay, just getting some more details. Well, Africa performance this time has seen a revenue decline of 3.1%. So that's on the Africa revenues. On expected lines, there has been a decline that we've seen in the Africa revenues. Margins have come in, I think, let me just try and get the Africa margins. But Africa margins have come in at 22.4%, and this would mean an improvement of about 35 basis points seen. On the India wireless business, where we highlighted the revenue growth has been quite tepid at just 2.7%, it's the company's margin performance which is very heartening. It's at 42.4% for Bharti's India margins, and that is a significant improvement of more than 240 basis points on a quarter-on-quarter basis. So both Bharti's India performance as well as Africa has driven the margin beat. Both of them have contributed. So the India margins have gone up by nearly 240 basis points on a quarter-on-quarter basis, while the Africa margins have gone up by 40 basis points. And these two, a combination of both India as well as, the Africa margins firing, is helping the consolidated margins beat expectations. So on the whole idea, Bharti continues to execute well. What we're now awaiting is just the volume growth from, Bharti, what they've done this quarter in terms of the total minutes growth. So we'll try and get hold of that. But in the meanwhile, Prakash, you want to come in on these details?
No, absolutely. I think, Reema, while the sales numbers might not show a very spectacular, beat, what's important is that Bharti has been systematically reducing its interest cost, the burden that it had, especially because of the African business. Now that's finally kind of showing or reflecting in the overall performance, because it does give you a much more leaner setup to work with, and that's exactly where the operational strength also will keep on building. And to increase numbers in terms of the top line, it's much easier than improving margins. So margin improvement is what takes a lot of tenacity and a lot of efficiencies into your channels, and that's what they've managed to achieve. So I'm sure the street's going to like some of these internals from that perspective.
Okay, the India volume growth has come in at 2.2%. The average revenue per user has gone up by 1% quarter-on-quarter to 196. The voice realizations have come in at 33. One second. They've come in at 33.49, which means they've been flat on a quarter-on-quarter basis. Let's get in Naveen Kulkarni of Phillip Capital. He also joins us on the phone. Naveen, a lot of numbers, but your initial reaction?
Numbers are seemingly good. Voice realizations, I would say, if 33.49 paisa means it would be marginally better than last quarter of 33.2 paise. So voice realizations have been declining for a while. So last whole year, voice realizations have declined, and this quarter voice realizations have been stable or moved up slightly. So that is an encouraging sign. Overall, very strong performance on the margin front, and earnings also, I believe they would have beaten. But of course, we need to see whether the sale of Burkina Faso and profit on that is included in the numbers or not.
Yes, the average revenue per user on voice, as Naveen has pointed out, has gone up marginally. It's improved by 0.7%. But the critical aspect is that after declining for 7 straight quarters, voice pricing at least has stabilized. The question is it a one-off, or are we now entering into a trend where voice pricing will stabilize? Idea last quarter, remember, had reported an improvement of nearly 5% in their voice pricing. That time, Bharti had reported a decline. But this quarter, it looks like Bharti Airtel too is trying to tighten the belt in terms of its costs as well as in terms of its promotions, etc., which is why the voice pricing has turned around after 7 straight quarters of a decline. This quarter, it's gone up by 0.8%. What about the India volume, the India revenue growth? It just stands at 2.7%. Is that slightly lower than what you were anticipating? And your thoughts on the volume growth at 2.2%?
India revenue growth, the mobile services revenue, it is very marginally lower than what we were expecting. So still they have added close to around 400 odd crores in the mobile services business. So that is still significant. Africa revenues are a little lower, but that is fine. That was kind of expected with the decline in the Naira. But overall, I would say that on the revenue front also, the performance is quite strong.
Okay, so Naveen is also quite happy with Bharti's performance. Thanks, Naveen, as well as Prakash, for joining in and decoding Bharti Airtel's Q1 numbers. On the whole, it's a good set of earnings because margins and profits are higher than expectations on the India wireless performance. The revenue growth has come in at 2.7%, lower than estimates. Volume growth at just 2.2%. But the two key highlights for the India performance is the fact that margins have gone back to the 2007 levels at more than 42%. So they've been steadily tightening and stabilizing their execution. So that's reflecting in Bharti's India margins, and voice pricing after declining for 7 quarters has managed to stabilize and report an improvement of 0.8% quarter on quarter. Africa has been weak on expected lines, though they did manage to improve their margins a tad bit. With that, Reema, I'll hand it back to you.